Hans Gromberg prepares for second week of consultations over new framework in Yemen. The United Nations warns that hunger catastrophe looms in Yemen amid tough funding crisis. Iran continues to use their proxy, the Houthis, as pressure card to make gains in nuclear pact negotiations. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fouad. Special Envoy Hans Gromberg has resumed the second week of political consultations over his new framework. Previously, he conducted intensive talks with delegates of political parties. He is expected to continue his discussions during this week. The following report has more details.
The UN Special Envoy to Yemen, Hans Gromberg, is preparing to launch the second week of consultations with the Yemeni parties in Yemen to reach a framework that leads to achieving a comprehensive settlement in the country. Informed Arab sources expect that the UN envoy will benefit from the militia's recent losses to reach a ceasefire. However, Yemeni observers believe Houthis will not stop their military escalation and terrorist attacks due to their affiliation with Iran. Meanwhile, observers of the Yemeni issue believe that the international efforts to reach a comprehensive vision that satisfies all Yemeni parties, including the Houthis, are far from attainable. A Yemeni political analyst considers that reducing international pressure will push Houthis to more stubbornness, allowing them to gain time and impose a fait accompli. They will intensify their efforts in mobilizing fighters and funding their war. Houthis even recruit Yemeni children, as children are forced to carry weapons, and number of children recruitment increased to 40,000 child, and sometimes their age is less than 7 years. Earlier, the UN envoy concluded the first week of his consultations in Amman with leaders from the General People's Congress Party and delegations from Islah, the Yemeni Socialist Party, and Nasserist Unionist People's Organization. The consultations discussed ideas for his framework, including a multi-track process that aims to chart a path towards a sustainable political settlement to the conflict. The Special Envoy explained that the consultations intended to gather, in a genuine way, ideas, views, and suggestions on immediate and long-term priorities for the political security and economic tracks. The UN envoy added, the conflict, which is soon entering its 8th year, continues to exacerbate the suffering of civilians, threaten regional stability, and undermine the prospects of a peaceful solution.
The United Nations stated that 70 million people are experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity in Yemen. The organization also stated that 2.2 million children are acutely malnourished due to conflict, economic shocks, and underfunding of critical humanitarian assistance programs. As the conflict in Yemen enters its 8th year, the humanitarian crisis deepens day after day. The international community must come together to help innocent civilians, especially when aid agencies are to suspend most of their programs due to funding crisis. More details on this are in the following report.
The international community must not forget Yemen's humanitarian crisis, as its people are on their knees. Yemen's conflict has caused a collapse in basic services such as health care and education, with millions of people displaced and 80% of the population dependent on aid. However, in the recent weeks, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict has taken the spotlight from other conflicts in the region. The International Committee of the Red Cross MENA Regional Director said, "I understand why the focus is on Ukraine, but we need to have the capacity to integrate all these catastrophes and not exclude one. Unfortunately, Yemen keeps on being unstable where the same people are paying the price." The ICRC has said that nearly 51% of Yemen's healthcare centers are operating after 8 years of war. In 2021, more than 157,000 were displaced, with more than 3.3 million remaining displaced across the country. Humanitarian actors worry that donor fatigue will impact the event, as governments shift allocations to Ukraine, Afghanistan, and other crises. People in Yemen continue to die either because of hunger, displacement, or Houthi attacks. The fighting has continued despite several rounds of talks and peace initiatives by the UN and the international community.
UNICEF has documented the killing and wounding of 10,200 Yemeni children during the last 7 years. The organization's report indicates that 47 children were killed or injured during the first 2 months of this year. The organization pointed out that the ages of the killed children ranged between 10 to 17 years. An international report said that courts in Sana'a turned to suppress Houthi opponents. The report stated specialized courts are issuing an increasing number of death sentences against political opponents of the militia. The report added the militia had turned the criminal court into Sana'a in a tool to suppress opponents, journalists, and religious minorities. The Iranian regime is using the Houthi militia as a pressure card against the international community and the U.S. administration to extract concessions on the nuclear pact negotiations and other issues in the region. The following report looks deeply at this.
During the last 8 years of Yemen's war, Houthi relations with Iran and other Axis members have become much stronger, and Iranian-sourced capabilities provided to the Houthis have stretched the battle beyond Yemen's borders. Iran supplied non-nuclear weapon expansion in Yemen, such as ballistic missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles, is part of a wider trend in the Middle East that puts the region's present security framework to the test. Iran has used the Yemen crisis as a testing ground for longer-range weapons. Iranian-made ballistic missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles fired by the Houthis give data to Iranian military development cycles. Furthermore, using Iranian-supplied UAVs, the Houthis have developed new tactics that have since been replicated by Iranian-backed Iraqi militia, demonstrating the transfer of information between battlefields. The Houthis' escalation of Yemen's conflict has increased the need to protect U.S. soldiers stationed in the region and help Gulf partners against ballistic missiles and unmanned aerial vehicle strikes. The missile defense systems in place to counter the Houthi threat, which is obtained from Iran, are expensive, especially when contrasted to the Houthis' comparatively low-cost weaponry. Counter-smuggling efforts have had little impact. Targeting Iranian-sourced components and rendering them useless before transferring them might result in even more asymmetrical outcomes. The U.S. must devise a comprehensive strategy for Yemen and the region that takes into account the Houthis' new status as a member of Iran's axis of resistance. The inclusion of the Houthis in the axis expands Iran's options for advancing regional objectives. The Houthis have maintained their independence while joining Iran's network of state and non-state forces fighting Western influence in the Middle East.
The Houthi militia burns a fuel tanker east of Al Hazm city in Al Jawf Governorate. Local sources said that the incident occurred following a chase that came after the Houthi gunmen intercepted the tanker and attempted to rob the fuel. This comes a day after a Houthi mine exploded in a truck loaded with fuel on a dirt road, injuring its driver. The Houthi militia targeted a popular market with a ballistic missile near a safer oil tanker in Ma'rib Governorate. Local sources said that the targeting resulted in deaths and injuries among civilians, as well as serious damage to citizens' property. The Houthi militia continues to target civilian populations, causing severe damage to public and private properties. The government forces thwarted an attempt carried out by the Houthi militia in Yafa, located between Al Bayda and Lahj governorates. The sources said that the militia suffered losses in equipment and lives amid a mass flee of the remaining members. A German foundation said the Houthi militia funds their networks and supporters mainly from taxes and fees. The foundation's report confirmed that the Houthi militia imposed a new tax of 20% on some businesses. According to the foundation, import and export licenses are granted only to Houthi supporters to finance its operations. The Houthi militia continues to impose new measures aimed at restricting the Mari University students. The militia forced the students to wear clothes that it said fit their religious identity. Students further confirmed that the university has turned into a new arena for the destruction of law and order. Coming next. Abiyan Governorate, the food basket for Yemen, starts producing wheat.
الواحد 120,000 والكيس الدقيق ب18,000 والكيس السكر اليوم ب20,000. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما أخرج لما ندب إحنا شبكينا ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل ما إحنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. The suffering of displaced people in Ma'rib continues, especially during winter. Recently, a number of fire casualties has hit some displaced camps. A fire broke out in Al Jufaina camp, killed a child and injured the rest of the family. The Fang report has more details.
Shayma, a grief-stricken mother, surveys the charred remains of her dwelling, which was devoured by flames in the aftermath of a faulty electric circuit. The fire consumed all of her belongings, left 4 of her family members severely burned, and killed one of the camp's children. Shayma tries in vain to salvage any possessions that haven't been completely lost to the fire. Fortunately for her, she found her family's personal documents. She, along with her neighbors and their children, await emergency intervention from humanitarian organizations to hopefully rid the affected families of the pile of burned belongings and provide them with shelter, clothes, tents, mattresses, blankets, food, and household items. Once again, camp residents find themselves displaced.
This bag holds my identification as well as my mother's, brothers, and my husband's. This is a Quran that's been mercifully unscathed. We were preparing dinner when the fire erupted and the girl was laying in bed. We couldn't cross the iron fence to save her. We managed to quench the fire, but it was too late.
Frequent fires erupt in the homes of the displaced in Al Jufaina camp in Ma'rib. The tents are made with straw, which makes them susceptible to catching fire. This camp houses the largest number of displaced people in the government, yet it lacks the barest of security measures.
What we need is a functional, safe and secure electrical wiring system to prevent combustion. At the very least, we need more firefighting stations on site. We only received 20 gallons of water in containers with no hose. Thankfully, we were able to put out the fire, but we suffered irreplaceable losses.
Displaced families in Al Jufaina camp have suffered through fires that have devoured their homes and their belongings, causing deaths and severe injuries among the displaced women, children, and the elderly. Humanitarian organizations have not been able to compensate for all of the families' losses at once.
Tribal groups closed the entrances to oil companies in Wadi and Sahara districts of Hadramaut. Local sources said that this came a day after threats issued by the committee implementing the outcomes of Hadramaut General Meeting. The donation leaders accused the oil company of failure to respond to civilians' demands. Abyan Governorate is one of the most agricultural areas in Yemen. It is called the food basket for the country. Farmers have started growing wheat on their own, and the production is really remarkable. Yet, local farmers keep calling on the government to support them with basic equipment in order to increase the quality and quantity of wheat. The following report has more details.
Farmers in Ebyan succeeded in cultivating wheat. Amer is one of the farmers who succeeded in cultivating wheat in Ebyan by cultivating limited areas of wheat as a first experiment to measure the feasibility of the idea. This idea comes for the first time in the history of the governorate, coinciding with the rising fears of its price, which has risen globally due to the effects of the Russian-Ukrainian war.
We started growing wheat in Abyan, and this is the second time we're doing it. At first, it didn't work out. In the second time, it was successful, though the quantity was not the desired one. By next November, the quantity would be perfect, and what delayed the process is that I had to bring flour from Shabwa. We call on the government to support this project. If the government supports it properly, we won't be in need to export wheat from outside.
This experiment is highly successful in promising a great agricultural future for wheat in Ebyen due to the fertility of its soil, the availability of water, and its good climatic factors. The farmers stress the need for government support or organizations to provide some capabilities to ensure the success of the wheat crop in large areas to produce economic quantities. On top of these capabilities, according to farmers, is the provision of solar energy systems for use in irrigating the crop instead of relying on diesel, whose prices are constantly rising insane.
Today, we talk about agriculture of wheat in Ebyen. Ebyen is considered the food basket for the entire country. First time, wheat was grown in Ebyen by a citizen called Abdullah al-Humayqani. First, he grew 2 types of wheat, Sayun 1 and Sayun 2. The produced quantity was really adequate, especially for a rural area like this. They started growing wheat in Ebyen in 2010 till today. The recent one was done by another citizen called Amir al-Muassil, who has grown 4 types of wheat, which are Hadramaut, Ghunaimi, Sikh and Shabwa.
This whole situation comes at a time when fears are rising about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict on global wheat prices, as 29% of global wheat exports come from Russia and Ukraine. An interruption or disruption of these supplies would push up global prices. This would push many countries, including Yemen, into a more severe humanitarian crisis.
King Salman signed $5 million USD agreement with UNICEF to provide drinking water in Yemeni governorates. The agreement aims at providing drinking water in Yemen to decrease the percentage of diseases resulted from polluted water. Under the signed project, 7 water resources will be rehabilitated with their full facilities, including pumps, connections, water reservoirs, and solar energy. Doctors Without Borders organization announced it will stop its operations in Ma'rib. It said this step comes after the kidnapping of 2 of its employees in Hadramaut a few days ago. The organization expressed its worry over the safety of its employees and added it will also withdraw its support for Ma'rib General Hospital completely. Healthcare system in Yemen has witnessed total infrastructure damage during war. Hospitals lack basic equipment and staff as well. Most of health facilities are not functioning. The following report has more details.
The Yemeni health sector is suffering from the consequences of prolonged and ongoing armed conflict, economic decline, and institutional collapse. Availability of functioning health infrastructure, such as hospitals and primary care centers, has dwindled under the weight of conflict, with a significant share of the population having challenges with access to health care. Currently, only 50% of the health facilities are fully functional, and over 80% of the population faces significant challenges in reaching food, drinking water, and access to healthcare services. Shortage of human resources, equipment, and supplies are severely hindering healthcare provision. Furthermore, conflict has exacerbated health challenges and resulted in weak governance for the healthcare sector. Deteriorating health conditions are reflected in different shapes, such as high levels of child malnutrition, low immunization rates, and outbreaks of communicable diseases. Maternal and child health are particularly affected by the worsening situation, with latest estimates pointing to 1 mother and 6 newborns dying every 2 hours. Additionally, conflict has also taken a direct toll on the health of the population and is now estimated to be the 3rd main cause of death in Yemen. Decreased external funding for health coupled with unprecedented challenges such as COVID-19 raise uncertainty about the future of health services in Yemen. The health system is extremely reliant on external funding, and the provision of health services is depending on development partners executing health programs. External financing for health has dropped drastically. With the ongoing war, Yemen will lose more of its health infrastructure. Nothing can stop such depletion but immediate end of the conflict.
A European Union delegation deputy head to Yemen participated in Dignity of Yemen Festival for Human Rights. European Union is organizing the launch of the third edition of the festival with the support of its partners. Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Hans Gromberg prepares for second week of consultations over new framework in Amman. The United Nations warns that hunger catastrophe looms in Yemen amid tough funding crisis. Iran continues to use their proxy, the Houthis, as pressure card to make gains in nuclear pact negotiations. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. Thank you for watching.